Welcome to the Heart of Dad podcast. Heart of Dad is a podcast for entrepreneurs who are passionate about their families and business and looking to find more clarity, more balance and more alignment in all areas of their life. Come and join the community at heartofdad.com or on Facebook at groups/Heart of Dad. This week on Heart of Dad, I'm interviewing Nico Czinczoll. Nico is managing partner of Core 42 and the founder of the Homecoming Academy. He's a trusted advisor to executives and management teams of large corporations and hidden champions. After a successful career in multinational corporations, he consults and coaches leaders at companies like Zalando, Infineon, BASF, Wintershall, Deutsche Bahn, Thalia, Buch.de, BP, Gazprom, Bertelsmann and mid-sized businesses. Nico lives in Berlin with his partner and his son. Well, this week on Heart of Dad, I'm delighted to introduce Nico Czinczoll. Hi, Nico.
Hi, Matt.
Great to have you here.
Yes, I'm happy to be here. Thanks for asking.
Yeah, you're very welcome. So tell us a little bit about yourself, Nico, just to kick us off.
Yes. Currently, I'm consulting organizations on reorganizations or how to organize themselves, basically, especially when it comes to transformation or other changes in the environment. And I also do a lot of one-on-one leadership coaching. So that's the second part. And for that, I have two businesses. One is the Core 42 management consulting, where we focus more on the structural side. And then with the Homecoming Academy, I'm now building a new organization, which really wants to bring together organizational systemic thinking with an expertise with what we know about psyche and body and contemplative practices, because I do believe that leaders in today's time, more and more, we need to really find certainty within ourselves. It's not anymore out there somewhere. We really need to find it inside of ourselves. And for that, we need to understand how organizations work. What are we focusing on? What's our area of work? We also need to understand psyche and body, which is the stuff we carry with us. And obviously, contemplative practices are very good because they help you to always navigate who are you in this world in a much deeper sense. So that's the Homecoming Academy, my kind of heart project at the moment that I'm pushing forward. And before that, I was working at BP. It's actually where we met. A long time ago, I was different positions there. I left in 2013, and I was responsible there as director of change of risk, responsible for how do we improve leadership and organizational processes after the Deepwater Horizon incident. And before that, I was basically heading different positions in leadership development and also organizational development. And by training, I'm a psychologist. So I expanded from one-on-one psychology more and more into the organizational and sociological and business aspects. And I have a son of 3, Noah, and live with my wife and my son in Berlin. Yeah, so that's maybe a short brief.
Beautiful. Yeah, thank you. That's a great short bio, and there's so much in it that's already rich and of interest. And I was wondering whether you could sort of parallel your personal journey. I mean, your professional journey sounds fascinating. I know a little bit about it because we've worked together and we've been talking over the last few months a little bit about what's been emerging. But can you tell us about your personal journey that's emerged into this place of coming into the Homecoming Academy?
Yes. Now I've been trying to decide how long, where I start, before birth, with birth, no, how long in my youth I'm going to start. So, but let's start with maybe studying. So I studied psychology, and then obviously one of the questions is, do you go into kind of more therapeutical areas? Well, I actually started studying psychology and computer science. So I wanted to go into artificial intelligence, but that was a bit early, and I didn't really cope well with the theoretical mathematics. But then I studied psychology, and after that, there was the question: do I go into therapy? I felt way too young, so I jumped into business, and that took me on an interesting journey because basically I got introduced into complex organizations, which if you have never worked there, actually you don't really know how they work. So that was fascinating, that journey as a working in leadership development at Daimler and then later at BP, to really get a feel for how does this amazing invention of organization that we brought into the world work, with all the psychological questions of how do humans relate to each other and how does communication work. And so that was a fascinating journey for me for a long, long time. It took me around the world. I was very privileged to really work for large corporates and have a lot of opportunities to experience but also learn. Alongside, there was always a kind of contemplative practice that started with mantra early on, and then I went into Zen meditations for a while. And when I became independent, so when I left the corporation, really a big development started, because first of all, I had a bit more time, but actually I was forced to describe who I am to other people all the time and to invent myself, because if you are independent on the market, the first question is, well, who are you? Yes, and what do you do, and what is it? How is this relevant? So obviously that kind of put a lot of attention on what do I want to bring into this world, which I think is a fascinating journey for people who go independent from maybe worked in large corporations before, because previously to that, a lot of the identity you carry is supported or structured by the organization you work for and the position you have. So when I became independent, I think a lot of development started, and kind of starting to get a better grip of who do I want to be in this world. So that's maybe the best kind of take for that phase. And out of that came now the Homecoming Academy, in the sense of bringing psychology together, the organizational aspects and the contemplative practices, to really help people develop their thinking, their mind, for better decision making and less suffering in these complex environment that we are all now living in.
Well, I mean, I think that's an interesting, it'll be like a podcast in itself to go down that avenue, but just for a little while, if we can explore, what is it that you see that's missing in complex organizations at the human level that is drawing you to form the Homecoming Academy?
I think, so one is really understanding ourselves. So one is, very often when we are in social interactions, we don't have clarity about what is driving ourselves. So that's one aspect. That's a psychological aspect, right? A lot of people, when we work in organizations, we're actually doing things unconscious. We don't even know why we're doing them. So that's one part. It's kind of this getting to grips with psyche and body. So what's the stuff that I actually bring to the table? If I'm not aware of it, or I haven't worked through it, it will just basically drive me unconsciously all the time into certain patterns that have nothing to do with the environment. And you see this in conflict all the time, right? So when people get into conflict, what they usually do in organizations, those are not rational conversations about which way A or B or C or D. These are usually kind of almost like we go back to kindergarten of, I feel threatened by whatever this person is doing because it reminds me of patterns that are way back in my past, and now starts my amygdala to fire, and my kind of frontal cortex cannot think anymore, and I go back to these old patterns, and I can't really rationally work. So that's that part, I think, that's very important. The other part is, and there's psyche and body help. So if we are becoming aware of it, if we understand it, if we train ourselves, that's very good. The second part is really understanding organizations, where, again, very often when we work in organizations, we personalize it, or we have metaphors that are either like machines or like from family. So we project onto the stuff that is happening in organizations that we experience a lot of models that are not really helpful. So if we see it more as a communication system, that is a deep question. What is that, and how can you learn how to navigate that? But you start to understand that it's an entity, a certain way of a system that operates with certain principles. And if you understand them, you can engage with it in a much more relaxed and more beneficial manner to yourselves, to others, and the society at large. And I always find that, most people either have the one or the two. You have the typical McKinseys of the world. They are on the kind of structural side, very good sometimes, but they lack a lot on the really understanding themselves. So they come to organizations and they are only helpful for one aspect. And the other way around, psychotherapists or people who are, or psychologists who are deeply steeped in individual and psychological and physical aspects, they have usually not very good understanding and models about organizations. So you need that combination. And the third, for me, contemplative practice is important because why do you do all of that? So what's the intention you actually bring to anything you do, to your work, to your life? And this is where, at least my experience is, you need to have a practice to put time and effort into exactly exploring, experiencing on a visceral, experiential level, what is me in this world.
I mean, thank you for sharing all that. And I'm sort of curious to know a little bit about your own journey of exploration. So, you started in your kind of higher education into psychology and computer science, which is an interesting kind of combination in itself. And then you've worked deeply in organizations going through profound experiences of change or readjustment. And then you've come out of that into your own life, and you've become a dad in that period. So to me, there's an intersection of a lot of movement kind of outside and within. And so I'd love to hear a bit more about, how this contemplative practice has evolved for you and what it's brought you in the last years of your life, and particularly as a dad. How's it supported you being a dad?
Yeah, a lot. I'm actually very happy that I got kids quite late in life, because I don't think I would have done a very good job if I would have had them much earlier. So contemplative practice, before my son was born, I actually meditated heavily, at least an hour a day for months. And that's my daily practice now. So I try to keep it up. It's not always an hour. I mean, that's always the case, but it helped me. So the meditation that I did, the contemplative practice I did, I brought together some of the psychology already in there, because one part of that meditation is not just to focus or to become flexible in your awareness. So those are two typical methods of meditation. You can really focus on a mantra, on your breathing, kind of point sharp, or you can have the more kind of floating awareness where you're just letting thoughts come and go. But there's a third part that I use, which is really investigating, exploring when things threw me off the rails. So when a certain emotion kind of took hold of me, and I went into a reaction which was a strong reaction. So kind of that's the best description I can give, that throws you off the rails. So when I meditated during that time, I really used that to kind of almost take that experience and then walk up the river, almost like in self-therapy, you could say, of what is happening there, where is this coming from? So what's beyond that? So why am I doing this? How does it appear? And with that, I pretty much kind of, I can tell you one experience where if I'm a psychologist, I sometimes was not taking seriously this idea of the inner child that we all carry with us. But I still remember this meditation when, from an emotional experience in my then current life, I started to kind of go back and really feel again being kind of 5-year-old and being alone, and my dad not being there for me. And this feeling of being alone, lost, not worthy, having that visceral experience. And that was before my son was born. And it helped me to kind of, I think what it does then, as you know, when you have these kind of experiences, you can reintegrate them. So it kind of takes away that moment of just repeating the patterns that you have been governed by. So this is where meditation, for instance, helped me on that part, like on the kind of becoming more aware of what's happening within me instead of reacting to certain triggers. Where children do this all the time, right? I mean, when we have kids, I mean, this is what they do. They let us relive our own childhood. And if we're not well aware, we will just, get triggered left, right, and center because they just do stuff. And they will hit the buttons, not because they want to, but because they just hit every button. So at some point, they will also hit the ones that we are vulnerable.
Beautiful. And have you found that, maintaining the practice within the kind of constraints you have now as being a dad, has that helped you stay within that sort of place of, obviously there are times when we all fall out of the calm-headed centeredness, but broadly speaking, has that practice supported you to ride those waves more effectively?
Yes, absolutely. So when I different to feel how I become more short-tempered, less able to just take things as they are, instead of trying to make them in a certain way. So yes, it makes a big difference. I can feel that.
What happens out of interest, like when, so I was talking about myself before landing this question on you, but, like you, I've done a lot of personal development work. I've trained as a psychotherapist. And yet there are times when, you could look at me and think, like, has this person done anything? Because, I lose it with my son, or I feel kind of those trigger points just overwhelm me. And, maybe I can bring myself back relatively quickly these days when that happens. But just, if you're willing to share, Nico, but are there times when kind of, even with all this rigorous work you've done, that actually you find yourself in a space that maybe, with hindsight isn't what you choose or isn't optimal? How does that play out?
Yes. Who doesn't? I know that if, for instance, I didn't sleep well, it happens that sleep is kind of, being tired is not a good combination, which being a parent sometimes just comes with the territory. So, and then, and also, stress from work, when you have allocated certain, or you have made a plan and the plan gets thrown out the window because something happens. So there are moments when kind of like this, especially with external clients, right? So there's, it's a difference when it's like work that I do on my own, but if there are external clients and their meetings scheduled, obviously there's some stress coming in. And then there are moments where if I don't catch myself early, then, at least some reaction starts to happen. And if it's just pure kind of being angry, I'm very fine with it. If it then comes to, if it goes beyond just expressing, but actually start trying to impose what's going on with me on others, that's then the difference, right? So I do feel that kind of emotions are always good because they give you a certain insight into yourself, but also others, because if you're always kind of centered and calm and nothing is happening, how do they know that you're stressed? They don't. So it's also,
Or that you're alive.
Yeah, exactly. It's a good social signal sometimes to kind of let that run through us. But yeah, there are moments with my son when I'm not present with him, then, because then I'm in my own mind, and I might want him to do something faster or differently than he wants to do it. And then instead of asking myself the question of, oh, what's actually going on? Is this really important, or can I just let it go? I might just force a certain, no, I'm putting on your shoes now, let me go. So, this kind of typical thing. Or certain other things where I make him do things that he might not need to do,
I think a lot of dads will recognize that in what you're sharing. One of the things I've been exploring with other dads on the podcast, Nico, is about their relationship with their own fathers. And you shared a little bit about your inner child exploration there, and some experiences of being like a 5-year-old. Would you be willing to share a little bit more about how your relationship with your dad has shaped you in your life, for good or for bad?
Sure. So let's start from back. Now I have a very wonderful, warm relationship with my dad in the way that he is. It's this is where my meditation, this work that I did with myself, really helped me, because even when some of the things came up and I saw some of the patterns, and then I at least constructed experiences around that. I don't know whether it happened that way, but at least I felt lonely and my dad wasn't there for me, or certain things that I at least felt like I remember. Moments where I could have gotten upset about him and all of this, and maybe even talk about it with him, but then after a while, it just cleared away, and now we are in a positive way, the way he is, because he is also shaped by his surroundings. So when I look back on myself, the impact that it had, I think for a long time I was looking for older men to acknowledge me and to kind of, make me feel worthy. So the typical, I transposed it on bosses and on, older men in my surroundings who I tried to impress with who I am. That was a long, not impress, that's maybe the wrong word, where I tried to prove myself to them, in the sense of being very loyal to them and being, but also then kind of not just being loyal to them and kind of trying to prove myself, but also very demanding on them, also the other part of having expectations that are just a bit misplaced if you're not in a family relationship. So I remember it was one strong impact. And how much really is that from my dad, or from, I don't know, but I think there were moments when I would have wished for a man to help me through this world, somebody kind of at important moments of dealing with all of these questions that you have to deal with when you grow up, like how to function in groups, how to be, and what is important, what is not important, to have a more closer relationship and have someone kind of give me a bit of guidance, and or just be there, in the sense of knowing I can go somewhere. And because I think I dealt with most things emotionally on my own, until I was quite older. So probably until, I don't know, until I really, my wife kind of helped me get over that one after a while.
Yeah, there's I suppose what's been kind of in my awareness as we've been talking is kind of this underlying need for safety that we all have. And, you've not used that word at all in what you've been sharing, but I was thinking about how in all the things you've been describing, there's it feels to me like there's an underlying need for all of us, all human beings, to feel safe in their environment, to feel safe in their relationships, to feel safe in their organizations. And in that safety, even though there can be chaos and complexity and difficulty, then from that safety emerges the best of who we are. Does that make any sense to you as an idea?
Yeah. And I'm torn. So when I listen to you, I'm torn between, yes, we need that. And on the other hand, development happens when we are not feeling safe. So this is the interesting paradox, I think, of life, is that the more safety you have, the less resilient you become. So I'm kind of in between. I think there are important moments in our lives, and I think family, there should be safe, there should be safety you can go and find or go to, but not as a general kind of generalized thing all the time. It's more the question of, do we find those safe havens? And I think when we grow up, yes, we need to have, and this is proven by all science, we need to have at least one person where we have that, right? That makes such a big difference for development of any child, is if this child has one person, at least, doesn't need to be the family, but has one person where they have that safety of being able to share and grow and be supported. They become much more resilient and much more functional in their way of social interactions and everything. However, I sometimes feel we have a tendency sometimes nowadays to over emphasize the safety. It needs that safe haven, but it needs also us feeling unsafe. And then over time, just to have that third maybe aspect in there, I think growing up and becoming an adult is then finding that safe place inside yourself. So not anymore needing it outside of yourself, but actually building it in yourself. So you always have it with you, and you just, whatever happens outside, you are able to deal with in a good way.
Is that the essence of the Homecoming Academy, to help people consolidate that place, or to discover that place of safety from within themselves, from which then they can operate when there is, a very volatile, uncertain world around them?
Yeah, it's a big part, and depending on what people need, or where they are in their journeys and where they are in their developments, needs different things. But yes, that's the name Homecoming is exactly expressing that, which is how do we find that in ourselves, so that we can then really, in a healthy way, connect with reality outside.
Mm-hmm. Just so switching direction a little bit. So yeah, your son Noah is 3 now, and you launched Homecoming Academy late last year, I seem to remember. And yes. Core 42, how long have you had that business? Is that a little bit longer, isn't it, I think?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's been a couple of years now. It's a senior partnership of, we're kind of 4 consultants and then we have a wider network of people we collaborate with. It's a bit older. It's people that, so one of them is somebody I met during my first job at Daimler, and then we kind of went away, and then we met again. He was the first organizational development consultant I ever experienced in my life. And then we started to reconnect, and so it's a small partnership, and we really focus on kind of essences of leadership, but more on when you deal with that organizational system, where obviously leadership and coaching is part of it, but it's more about the, when we reorganize or when we do structural changes to the systems that we operate.
I suppose my question is, when after I had my son, I also started. I had a couple of businesses that I started in that year after he was born, and there's a whole story to explore about why I did that when I did it. But I'm curious about your story, Nico, that you've put together 2 different organizations in the first 3 years of your son's life, and I don't want to make any assumptions, but I know from my side that was quite an undertaking to balance the wonderful and sometimes terrible revolution of having a child in your life, particularly, as you say, a bit later in life, because like you, I was maybe a bit older when I had my son. How have you managed that kind of that experience of having a young child and also focusing on developing two businesses?
Yeah, so I made a very conscious decision that when my child was born, I actually stayed at home for a lot. So the first, and this is where it's nice when you have a senior partnership, so you don't have to run an organization. So that's with Core 42. So there's not a lot of operational overhead that I need to deal with, but it's really more than if we work with clients in certain projects. So that's a very good, it's a very privileged way of living when you can do consulting and you can actually are able to a bit kind of decide how much workload you want to have. So I decided very consciously that I will stay at home, and for the first 7 months, I really spent a lot of time at home. I maybe worked like 20%, really just very few selected clients and short engagements. And it's a long time now away, but it was really, it was the right thing to do, and I would never want to miss it ever again. It was because it's magic. I mean, this is where life, we can pretend all the stuff we build and it's wonderful, but actually new life coming into the world and kind of making that those first months were just very. That was very nice. So now, obviously, if you are working in self-employed, independent, the second year, then I worked a lot. So I was really away for many, many engagements now and many, many clients, and sometimes 4 to 5 days a week away from home. And then I focused on Noah during the weekend because also my partner needed time then to recover. So that was quite a tough time. That was really tough. It was a tough year for us and for me. Kind of going away sometimes, not wanting to go away, but going to clients, working, but also coming back, and then actually the week had 7 days and 18 hours, and there was no time to really relax. Now, so there were different phases, and now there's a phase where, so now we have coronavirus, so it's a bit different anyway. So now we have a much more balanced lifestyle that is forced, which gives me time to develop the Homecoming Academy also a lot in the background, and also some new projects for Core 42. And so it moves in phases, and I try to balance. So now we had 2 weeks where we focused very heavily. I was again very heavily with the family, and now again the next weeks probably I will move more to the business side, and kind of it's a bit of like breathing back and forth, how we manage that.
How have you kind of organized that with your wife and negotiated that in a sense? Because that also seems to be one of the challenges for entrepreneur dads, is managing not only the relationship with their children but with their partners, and creating the space for their dreams, and also taking into account everybody else's needs.
Yes, it is. It's if you have one child, you have a triangle, and all 3 parties have different needs and different wants. And yes, so with my partner, we are also moving in phases and adapting. So so far we had our challenges, especially during that year where I was away a lot. It was really challenging because it was overwhelming, I think, for all of us. So this is why we also shifted a bit afterwards, and I made a conscious decision to work less and earn less and be more at home again. And with my partner, I don't want to speak too much about her because she's not here, so it's always, difficult. But she's not a stay-at-home mom, so she does work, and she does have her own projects. She's coaching and teaching around acting most of the time. That's her main, and she's also kind of directing smaller plays. So we're both self-employed, which makes it trickier and better at the same time. So we have a bit more flexibility. So it's not like one of us has a 9-to-5 job, so we can always kind of manage, but it's a very fluid lifestyle, that's for sure. So we always need to rearrange and have constant kind of adjustments. But yes, she does take much more on at home and with our child than me, that's for sure. And at the moment it feels I guess so, when we have the conversation, it feels okay and adequate for now, that the space is large enough that she can continue to live what she wants. But I'm sure that in a couple of months we will again readjust a bit, so it kind of is always a bit of a fluid space.
Yeah, that rings true with me, and I'm sure it would ring true with other dads who are listening to this and who've had the conversation already. Just sort of circling back a little bit to your relationship with your own dad, what things did you choose to do differently now that you're a dad, Nico, from how your dad was?
You might want to pause just a second.
Yeah, so we just had a bit of a glitch there, but I was just asking Nico, what choices have you made actively as a dad to not be like your own dad?
So this makes so many assumptions about how my dad was. But yes, so really I'm not sure whether I place my decisions anymore on that reference. It's really more, so Noor is probably the person I want to be present with the most. If I can say it like that. It's not always working that way, but if I am with him, I want to be with him, and I want to give him the opportunity and space to explore and grow. So treating him as not as an adult, that's the wrong way, but as a fully functioning being, not like kind of anything else than that, just really being with him and kind of be somebody that walks beside him and have some explore and always have fun with him as well. So it's not like a kind of cerebral kind of observation, but that's how I would describe it.
Beautiful. Well, we're just about out of time, so I know you got to run to something now, and I've really appreciated how you've shared with us for today's podcast. Where can people find out more about your projects? Where should they go?
The best is probably you can either start with the LinkedIn profile, which is easy. Otherwise, it's homecomingacademy.com and it's core42.com. So those are the two places.
I'll add those in the show notes. Thanks for spending time with me, Nico. Great to see you.
Thank you, Matt. Thank you really very much for this conversation. All the best.